What you're about to hear may blow your mind, but Arlong was right. Doflamingo was right. And Danelle was right. Well, kinda. But this video will contain manga spoilers all the way up to the latest chapter of the One Piece manga, chapter 1140. So if you haven't read up to there, I suggest you skedaddle. But in the latest chapter, we got a big reveal, the Mother Flame. With that introduction, a lot of people went back scrambling all the way to Skypiea, or at least the cover story from Skypiea with Enel going to the moon. If you look all the way up here, you actually see something that resembles the Mother Flame. Now let's pay attention to what Vegapunk said in this chapter. He said, "I was fixated on my dream of developing an everlasting energy source, hell-bent on driving the world to a bigger and brighter future." In that revelation, he also said, "But I flew too close to the sun." And that one statement has a plethora of meaning behind it. The title of the chapter was The Wings of Icarus, so you can look at it from the Greek mythology standpoint, where Icarus did not follow his father's flight pattern and flew a little bit too close to the sun, and the beeswax began to melt from his wings, and they basically fell off. Look at it as him flying too close to the sun got Nika, with him trying to uncover the truth, which goes directly against the world government and Imu-sama directly. Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, and we get to see the clash between the sun god and Luffy, and Mercury, literally Workery, the Gorosei. Flying too close to the sun, fire, heat, literally Luffy's hand catching on fire. There's a plethora of ways you can look at it. At this point, you're probably wondering, why do you say Arlong was right? Well, let me explain. Well, Arlong said this: "We fishmen are evolved humans who have developed the ability to breathe seawater. Our fish-like powers make us far superior to you, who can do a lot of things that no human can. We fishmen are the lords of all creation." And he also says all creatures are not born equal. I'm looking at me crazy like, how can I agree with what he's saying? But let's look at it from the One Piece standpoint. Now that we know that the world is sinking into the ocean, the fishmen essentially have moved up in hierarchy. Celestial dragons moving all the way to the top of the red line and kicking out the Lunarians, which will be very important later. It shows that they possibly knew of the world sinking or eventually sinking. And it's funny, in this chapter, Doflamingo, a celestial dragon, also said, "Looks like we need to move somewhere high up," aka Pangea. The reason why Arlong is so important with the ideology he has is because fishermen have been systematically oppressed, barred from the mainland, sold as slaves, but also looked at as inferior creatures. In reality, even though they're superior, they kind of just want to act like everyone else. Like, we had fishermen like Otahime that tried to bridge the gap with celestial dragons directly by saving one. So were the fishermen actually treated like that because they're different, or because of where they'll be in the hierarchy once the world changes or sinks? And that's why Doflamingo was right. He said, "Those who sit at the top determine what's wrong and what's right. This very place is neutral ground. Justice will prevail, you say. But of course it will. Whoever wins this war becomes justice." The 20 Kingdoms won. They call themselves the Celestial Dragons. They are now deemed gods. Lunarians were eradicated. Fishermen are not looked down upon and sold as slaves, as well as minks. With all that, we lead back to Skypiea because also Enel was right. He said, "Land is a place for land, humans have a place for humans, and the kami has a place for the kami. Each has a place in which it must return." Slowly see things turn into its natural state. The mystery that was covered up is now being revealed by Vegapunk. The world is beginning to sink, possibly to turn back to its natural state? Maybe, but now that everyone knows it, they're going to try and stop it. From my old video, it's probably going to involve something with the red line. Back to things going to their natural state. Kami going to a place of the kami. Enel going to the moon. Enel went to the moon and revitalized an ancient city named Burka with his power. Here's why this is important. Ancient energy that Vegapunk was talking to. Enel went to the moon and learned about the ancient moon people. I think he saw has so many implications and clues to the whole One Piece story. Like the creation of automatas is like Vegapunk creating the pacifistas. Right here looks like a flower darrow fruit. Literally the moon races themselves. Seeing something that resembles the Mother Flame. Now let's go back to things returning to their natural state and Vegapunk. Remember how I mentioned Lunarians were going to be important? And I also remember that they're eradicated? Now let's talk about it. This cover story showed us another interesting character, Dr. Tsukimi. Dr. Tsukimi was another scientist from Karakuri Island, Vegapunk's homeland, who created automatas. Dr. Tsukimi, or Tsukimi, actually stands for moon gazing, and while he was eating dumplings, he died because there was an explosion on the moon. And these automatas, these things right here, actually went to the moon to get revenge on whatever killed Dr. Tsukimi. And once they got to the moon, they interacted with these things right here, the space pirates. The interesting thing about these people right here is a thing on their hat that looks like Vegapunk's head. They kept excavating the moon ruins, but for what? I believe they were there to find out what Enel found for himself later on, the ancient city of Burka. Things that Enel saw on the wall, Vegapunk actually saw as well. And the reason why all these different life forms look so vastly different is because they're all created by Vegapunk in order to excavate the moon to find out more about the ancient kingdom, or at least the ancient eternal energy. And for what he did learn, he was able to create his own things. Automatas are essentially the pacifista. The mechanized sea beasts are right here, and the eradicated Lunarians would be right here. Lastly, of course, the Mother Flame. But the originals, the automatas, Poseidon, the moon people, Shandians, Skypeans, and Birkins, this Mother Flame wasn't actually fire. It was actually the energy taken from the minks, electro. Because as we saw, Enel's electricity is what powered the automatas. And that'll explain Vegapunk's sin a little bit more. It's possible the minks were misused or abused for this kind of power. Remember what Jinbei said. When those in the mink tribe stare directly into an unclouded full moon, it is said that deeply buried memories of a feral past are awakened. And the Mother Flame was created possibly in the same way, but with Lunarians. Remember, Kaido and Albert, or King, were both being operated on Punk Hazard before Kaido rescued him. Yes, King's DNA was used to create the Seraphim, but his innate power and flame were used to create the Mother Flame. One doctor from Kawakuri Island died by looking at the moon, the other died flying too close to the sun.